It is district breakdown time for 5A Division One. I'm here with Diggs, who always requests me to acknowledge him. You're acknowledged. Let's talk about this 9-team district. We have a lot of teams coming from different directions. How do you feel this one will turn out?
Well, when I look at this district, this is probably, and I've covered football for a while now, this is one of the most unique Dallas-ish area, and I put the ish in there because you get real hot and bothered when we talk about these Metroplex area teams and how far we should consider it. But this is one of the most unique districts ever. I don't think I've ever seen a pairing where we're talking about Killeen in a district this big, and it has a lot to do with just that growth around Waco and that just kind of in that Chisholm Trail corridor down in the Fort Worth area. It's growing in such a way that all of a sudden you got this crazy district where you got new schools like Lake Belton, you got the Killeen schools, you got Waco coming down from 6A. Never seen anything like this, Ward, and so we are going to have new matchups, new rivalries, and new things to talk about. But at the end of the day, I think that it's going to be more of the Syntex teams that are going to be the big dogs in the top half of the district than the Metroplex teams.
No, I tend to agree with you on that. But for the sake of our DFW fans, let's talk about the 4 DFW teams that are in this district: Midlothian, Granbury, Cleburne, and Red Oak. What do you think out of those 4 teams and how they may stack up?
Yeah, I got Midlothian as my number 1 team in this district. They got so much coming back. You know, Midlothian runs that triple option, which is a unique kind of an offense, and we're seeing more teams running it these days. So it's not that unique kind of a thing where only 1 out of 50 teams is running it, but it's still unique enough to where if you're not paying attention, they're practicing it every day. You're not. When you're running against your scout teams. Jordan Richburg is coming back. I think he's the big dog on the running back, but they got 3 running backs coming back who saw a good time last year, and Dago Benson and Michael Garber. They got a good receiver, although they don't throw the ball much, but, if you get some one-on-one coverage, Bryant Wesco, he's got a tech offer right now. He could do some damage, and they could do some big damage to the air. And their defense is a really good returning. They got some 2 good defensive line players coming back in Cade Tompkins and Bryce Starlin. And what I really like about Midlothian, they really focus on the lines at Midlothian: offensive line, defensive line. When you're coaching a Midlothian team and you're playing a Midlothian team, that they're going to be solid in the trenches, and that makes that team go. And if they got some skill players on top of that, that's when they're going to be good, and that's their formula. And this year, I think they've got that formula up and going.
What do you think about the Red Oak Hawks? They were 2-8, but they have a returning quarterback at least.
Yeah, Red Oak is an interesting team because last year they were in a tough district, played some really good teams, but they were going through some coaching changes, coordinator changes. They had that quarterback transfer out with Chris Parsons, and it's that chaos of all of that and what's going to happen this year. But in that corridor they're in with Lancaster and DeSoto, there's talent in that corridor, and Red Oak has been thriving with that talent over the last couple of years, and they are going to be good. I don't know how good they're going to be. I think they're the big question. I have them slotted in as my number 4 team in this district, so I do think they're going to make the playoffs. But I could also see, because I've got number 2 to number 6 being so closely packed that they could end up at 6, they could end up at 2, depending on how they are. They got Warren Roberson coming back, Jalen Robinson, as you talked about, coming back, and a good running back, Moses Martindale, coming back. And I think what you're going to see with Red Oak, and you're going to see with some of these Central Texas teams that we're going to talk about as well, they're going to be playing both sides of the ball. And you might see a back at linebacker, and they might thrive in that, able to overcome some of the lack of depth in some issues with 2-way players. So it'll be interesting to see how Red Oak fares this year. But I have them number 4 right now.
And how about Cleburne and Granbury? They're probably going to struggle to get some wins, but what kind of progress do you think those programs are going to go through?
Yeah, Granbury lost their good quarterback, Austin Jinkerson, last year. He graduated as a senior. So Granbury's going to be very young, and I think they're going to struggle in this district, especially because there's going to be so much coming back above them. A couple players to watch, James Bird and Braden Olthoff. James Ward, the wide receiver, and the defensive tackle, Braden Olthoff. Those are two players you need to watch. Cleburne is very young. They had two freshmen make all-district last year, in Eli Martinez and Lance Sansom, but they graduated heavy. And now they're coming up. I know that they don't have to play Aledo anymore, but they're coming up to a pretty big district. So I think they're going to struggle as well. I've got Cleburne rated 7th out of the 9 teams. I got Granbury rated 8th out of the 9 teams.
Interesting. So out of the 3 Killeen teams, Lake Belton and Waco, how do you see that panning out? I know you've been talking all week about Lake Belton's wide receiver that's 5-star Micah Hudson there. And he's just a junior, I believe. So talk a little bit about that team and maybe the other guys.
Lake Belton is one of those teams, and I'm going to call on to you because, it's one of our things we talk about. Is it Pato, Pygal?
It's Pato.
Katie Pato, and then you had Alvin Shadow Creek a couple of years ago. What you're seeing is some of these really new schools coming in and exploding with growth, and they get some of these couple big name players, and all of a sudden they're right there in the state championship mix. And Lake Belton kind of reminds me of Katie Pato and Alvin Shadow Creek as far as playing that renegade schedule, and then all of a sudden they're in UIL and they're probably going to have 6A numbers by next year, and then you're looking at them as like, wow, this is a really good team, even though it's a brand new team you haven't heard of. Javian Wilcox is a really good player. They're going to run him in multiple formations at wide receiver. He's a safety committed to Baylor. We talked about Micah Hudson as a top receiver, maybe the top receiver of the 2024 class. Their quarterback is solid, Connor Cruz, just a really smart player, also plays baseball, multi-sport athlete. Talked to the Lake Belton coach, and they're not going to be doing spring ball this year because they have so many multi-sport athletes, and that's what they're really focusing on at Lake Belton. I've got Lake Belton as my number 2 team, and I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. So if you're in the southern part of the Metroplex and they're coming to play a road game, I check that out because Lake Belton's going to be fun to watch this year.
That's awesome. Who is your top 4? Why don't you run them down for me real quick?
Yeah, I got Midlothian 1, Lake Belton 2, Killeen Shoemaker 3, and Red Oak 4. And of those Killeen schools, all of them struggled last year in 12-6A, but coming down to 5A always is a game changer. And all 3 of those the Killeen schools were pretty young last year. With Shoemaker, they're going to have a great defense, and I think we're going to have some interesting matchups when it comes to Shoemaker's defense. And a few years ago, they made a good run and played North Mesquite in the first round of the playoffs. They really hung their hat on defense then as well. And they got a good running back. So Jamarius Stewart's coming back at running back. They got 3 all-district linebackers coming back, and Matthew Moore, Steve Albert, and Valentino Green. With a name like Valentino Green, you got to be good. Defensive line, Xavier Tibbs and Darian Burleson coming back. I expect them to have one of the best defenses coming back. And if they can stifle you on defense, if their offense with Jamarius Stewart can do enough, it's a very packed middle in this district, and nobody's going to run away with it. And in this district, as we talked about last week with 3-5A, you want to avoid in the playoffs, 3rd and 4th place have to play Aledo or Denton Ryan, depending on how that shakes out. So really, the 1 and 2 spots are going to be super crucial to get in this district.
That's a good point. And even 1 and 2, you don't get an easy matchup in the first round.
Oh, absolutely not.
Especially the way you were talking Burleson Centennial last week. Before we go, I want to ask one quick question about Midlothian and your thoughts on that school as a football program. They seem to be, when it comes to realignment time, they're in a spot in the Metroplex where they're tossed any old which way. They could go to any district at all. We don't see them as much until the playoffs because even Coach Wendell says, hey, we don't play a sexy brand of football. We're triple option. We're going to run. We haven't jumped on the old throw the ball every down type deal. But yet they make the playoffs. That's what they do, except for the year where they missed out in percentage points there in 2020. But what is your thoughts on that program and just the way they're maybe perceived in the Metroplex and maybe even the state?
Yeah, Mansfield Summit made me not talk about that 2020 thing again, and I'm a man of my word. But Midlothian, you just nailed. with your question, you nailed everything on the head right there, because they are so solid. And even with Midlothian Heritage, last year they were in that 4A Division I district where they're playing Waco La Vega. So it looks like Midlothian, where they're falling on the map, kind of is like Mesquite. They're just going to be that team that can go anywhere. And they don't play that sexy brand of football, but again, they hang their hat on their lines. And when you hang your hat on your lines and you focus that offensive line and defensive line, you're not going to have these solid, just these highlight plays that we love to see on TV and things like that. But they're very good, and they have a really good chance because if depending on how long they can avoid Aledo and Denton Ryan, and if you remember, the last team that gave Aledo a big run in that district was Midlothian. They were the last team that pushed Aledo in district to a big to a chance where we're thinking, oh, this is it. So Midlothian against Aledo in the playoffs could be a very interesting matchup if it happens. And Midlothian has a chance to make a really good run in Region 1. But again, in the second round, they might be playing a team like Amarillo Tascosa, where you get your Spider-Man meme out and they're both pointing at each other with those triple option offenses. But Midlothian, quality coaching across the board. And it's not that they don't play 7-on-7 and know how to sling the ball around a little bit. They just don't have to, and they play to their strengths, and their strengths are their line.
Boy, that would be interesting if they played Burleson Centennial in the first round, somehow Tascosa in the second round. Like, holy cow, they're mirroring each other. But that's going to do it for 4-5A at Division I. We're going to do 5-5A Division I next. That's a very interesting district as well. It looks like it may be very top-heavy with Timberview. And then it's the Dallas ISD and Carrollton ISD teams. But we will talk about that next week. Thank you for joining me, Diggsy, and we will see you later.